The land is still. At the edge of the forest, where grass thins into stone and scattered trees stand like sentinels, the morning arrives without urgency. Light slips slowly across the ground, revealing dew on leaves, untouched soil and air that carries no alarm. Birds resume their calls. Insects move through familiar paths. Nothing appears disturbed. Nothing suggests that the balance of the night has been broken. Yet something is missing. In places like this, absence carries weight. A tether hangs loose where livestock once stood. Hoofprints end without explanation. The earth shows no sign of struggle, no churned soil, no dragged marks, no blood darkening the grass. The landscape holds its shape as if the night passed without incident. To an untrained eye, the scene looks ordinary. To those who know this land, the silence feels deliberate. The wild often announces violence loudly. Broken branches, flattened vegetation, trails that tell a clear story of pursuit and escape. But here the ground offers no narrative. Wind has not erased tracks. Rain has not washed evidence away. The environment has simply remained intact, unchanged, as though it never witnessed intrusion. The absence is not the result of time, it is the result of method. In ecosystems shaped by constant movement and pressure, the smallest disruptions tend to linger. A snapped stem can remain for days. A disturbed patch of soil may take weeks to settle. Yet in certain regions, entire events conclude without leaving such marks behind. Predation occurs, but the land does not remember it. The space where something once lived returns immediately to stillness. This kind of silence is not empty, it is structured. Some predators impose themselves on the environment, forcing the landscape to bear witness. Others move within it so precisely that the terrain absorbs their passage without resistance. They do not tear through the wild. They pass through it, aligning with its contours, its textures, its rhythms. Their presence is temporary. Their departure is complete. By daylight, there is nothing to follow. No trail to trace back into the trees. No evidence to suggest direction or distance. Only the realization that the ecosystem has performed its quietest function removal without disruption. Life taken without imprint. In these moments, the wild reveals a different form of dominance. Not speed, not strength, but the ability to act without being recorded. A form of survival so refined that even the land itself is left unchanged. This is not the story of a chase. It is the story of how something can happen and leave no memory behind. Across Africa and large parts of Asia, one predator occupies a position that is often misunderstood. It is neither the largest nor the fastest hunter in its environment. It does not dominate open plains through sheer numbers, nor does it rely on overwhelming force. Instead, its success comes from a different strategy, one built on adaptability, restraint, and near-perfect integration with its surroundings. The leopard exists almost everywhere predators are forced to compromise. From dense rainforests and rocky highlands to dry savannas and forested mountain slopes. The species thrives in spaces where visibility is limited and competition is constant. Its wide geographic range is not the result of dominance, but of flexibility. Where other large predators require specific conditions to survive, leopards adjust their behavior to match what the landscape allows. Physically, the leopard is built for control rather than spectacle. Its body is compact and powerful, optimized for short bursts of movement rather than prolonged pursuit. Strong forelimbs and shoulders provide exceptional lifting ability, while flexible joints allow silent movement across uneven ground. The rosette-patterned coat does more than conceal it, disrupts the outline of the animal, breaking its shape into fragments that dissolve into shadow and foliage. In low light, the pattern does not hide the leopard. It erases it. Within the food web, leopards occupy a critical but understated role. They regulate prey populations that are often overlooked by larger predators, targeting animals that live close to cover or move through transitional zones between open land and forest. This places leopards at the boundaries of ecosystems' edges where human activity, herbivore movement, and competing predators frequently intersect. Survival in these margins demands precision. Unlike pack hunters, leopards operate alone. There is no coordinated pursuit, no collective force to overwhelm prey. Every hunt depends on minimizing detection, conserving energy, and choosing the moment of engagement carefully. A failed attempt carries consequences. Injury, exposure, or loss of territory can follow. As a result, leopards avoid unnecessary confrontation, not out of weakness, but efficiency. When compared to other large carnivores, this approach becomes clear. Lions assert control through visibility and numbers, reshaping entire landscapes around their presence. Cheetahs rely on speed, trading endurance for explosive acceleration in open terrain. Leopards do neither. They compress the hunt into the smallest possible window, reducing interaction with the environment to a minimum. The goal is not to overpower the land, but to pass through it unnoticed. This strategy extends beyond hunting. Leopards rest in elevated positions, navigate routes that minimize noise, and select territories where cover provides constant concealment. Their behavior reflects an evolutionary pressure not just to succeed, but to remain undetected even after success. In this role, the leopard becomes a paradox within its ecosystem. It is an apex predator that avoids attention, a hunter whose presence is often inferred only after the fact. Where other predators leave signs of occupation, tracks remains disturbed terrain. The leopard leaves uncertainty. What defines the species is not what it shows, but what it removes. Not the trace of pursuit, but the absence left behind. Movement leaves evidence. In most ecosystems, the ground records passage with remarkable accuracy. Soil compresses, vegetation bends, loose stones shift. Even the lightest animals disturb something as they travel. For predators, this becomes a liability. Every step risks exposure, every sound narrows the margin between hunter and hunted. Yet among large carnivores, leopards interact with the terrain differently. Their movement is not force applied to the land, but alignment with it. In regions where leopards hunt, the environment itself is often unforgiving. Dry soil preserves impressions for hours. Damp earth records weight with precision. Leaf litter announces careless steps. For many predators, these conditions impose limits. For leopards, they shape behavior. The species has evolved movement patterns that reduce contact, distribute weight, and exploit surfaces less likely to retain information. The ground in this context becomes a map of risk. Soft soil, sand, and loose vegetation are avoided whenever possible. Instead, leopards favor firm substrates, rocky outcrops, exposed roots, compacted earth along animal trails. When crossing areas that would normally capture footprints, they place their paws deliberately, often aligning steps with existing depressions left by other animals. A fresh track is not erased, it is never created. This precision begins with anatomy. Leopards possess padded paws that distribute weight evenly, minimizing pressure points. Retractable claws remain sheathed during movement, preventing scraping sounds and accidental marks. The limbs move in a controlled sequence, keeping the body balanced and close to the ground. Unlike animals that bound or sprint, leopards advance in measured increments, pausing frequently. Each pause serves a purpose: to listen, to reassess, and to ensure the terrain remains undisturbed. Vegetation presents a different challenge. Branches snap. Dry leaves crackle. Tall grass bends and signals passage long after the animal has gone. Leopards respond by selecting paths that already carry movement game trails. Narrow corridors created by herbivores or gaps formed by fallen trees. In dense cover, they adjust their posture, lowering the body and shifting laterally to avoid contact. The goal is not speed, but invisibility. This behavior produces an unusual result. After a leopard passes through an area, the environment often looks unchanged, not because evidence has been removed, but because disruption never occurred. Leaves remain upright. Soil retains its natural texture. Even experienced trackers can struggle to determine where the animal entered or exited. The landscape offers no linear story to follow. Crucially, leopards do not move in straight lines. Direct paths are predictable and often exposed. Instead, movement is layered, advancing, circling, stopping, and redirecting. This non-linear travel pattern reduces the accumulation of visible signs in any one place. Rather than a continuous trail, there are isolated points of contact, each separated by distance and concealment. The land cannot connect them into a readable sequence. Time further amplifies this effect. By the moment a missing animal is noticed or a search begins, hours may have passed. Wind shifts loose debris. Insects resume activity. Minor disturbances blend back into the background. What little evidence existed becomes indistinguishable from natural variation. The absence feels intentional even when it is simply the result of restraint. This method of movement is not accidental. It reflects a survival strategy shaped by constant pressure from prey that flee at the slightest signal, from rival predators that steal kills, and from human presence that punishes visibility. Over time, leopards that moved quietly survived. Those that disturbed the land did not. In this way, the leopard does not conquer the environment. It cooperates with it. The terrain becomes a partner rather than an obstacle, absorbing motion instead of recording it. Where other predators leave a path behind them, leopards leave uncertainty. When the hunt finally begins, the land has already been prepared, not by force, but by silence. And by the time anything is missing, the ground has nothing to say. The moment of contact is brief. For leopards, hunting does not unfold as a prolonged chase across open ground. It is compressed into seconds, sometimes less. The difference between success and failure lies not in endurance, but in timing, positioning, and the ability to end the encounter before the environment reacts. Leopards select hunting periods when visibility works against their prey. Dusk and dawn provide this advantage. Light is unstable, shadows stretch unpredictably, and depth perception falters. In these conditions, prey animals rely heavily on sound and movement to detect danger. Any disturbance, cracking branches, shifting grass, sudden noise can trigger flight. For this reason, leopards avoid engagement until every variable aligns. Hunger alone does not dictate action. Opportunity does. As a hunt begins, movement remains minimal. The final approach is measured in centimeters rather than meters. Muscles stay engaged but restrain, storing energy for a single decisive release. The leopard's body lowers, compressing its profile. Each step is placed with care, ensuring that balance is maintained and noise is avoided. The prey often remains unaware until the distance is already irreversibly small. When the attack occurs, it is sudden and concentrated. There is no extended pursuit across the terrain. The leopard launches forward in a short burst, closing the gap before the prey can generate momentum. The objective is not to overpower through struggle, but to neutralize immediately. The jaws target the throat or neck, cutting off airflow or blood supply with precision. Resistance is minimized, sound is minimized, time is minimized. This efficiency serves a critical purpose. Prolonged struggle creates evidence. It disturbs soil, flattens vegetation, and attracts attention from competitors. Leopards operate in environments where other predators, hyenas, lions, or scavengers, can arrive quickly if alerted. Ending the encounter swiftly reduces the window in which interference can occur. A quiet kill is a protected kill. Blood, when present, is limited by the nature of the attack. By targeting vital points and maintaining control, leopards prevent the kind of chaotic movement that spreads visible signs across the ground. There is no dragging of a struggling animal across open space. There is no extended collapse that marks the landscape. The site of the kill remains localized and often concealed by natural cover. Once the prey is subdued, the leopard does not linger. The ground-level phase of the hunt is transitional. Remaining on the surface exposes the predator to theft and detection. Instead, the leopard acts quickly to remove the evidence vertically. Powerful forelimbs grip the carcass, lifting it from the earth with a strength disproportionate to the animal's size. The prey is carried away from the scene often before the environment has fully absorbed what has occurred. This removal fundamentally alters how the event is perceived. Without a body, the location loses its narrative. There is no focal point to investigate, no remains to indicate direction or distance. Any minor disturbance that did occur becomes ambiguous. Was it caused by wind, by grazing animals, by natural settling of the ground? The absence of a clear endpoint dissolves the story before it can form. The speed of this process is crucial. In many documented cases, the entire sequence from initial movement to the disappearance of the prey takes only minutes. By the time daylight returns or humans arrive, the environment has already stabilized. The land does not show signs of violence because violence did not have time to imprint itself. This method of hunting also reduces risk to the leopard. Injury sustained during a prolonged fight can be fatal in the wild. A wounded predator loses access to food territory and reproductive opportunity. By ending encounters quickly and cleanly, leopards protect themselves as much as they secure a meal. Efficiency becomes a form of self-preservation. Importantly, this behavior is not learned from a single event. It is reinforced across generations through survival. Leopards that hunted loudly, dragged prey openly, or left visible trails faced higher competition and greater danger. Over time, those strategies disappeared. What remained was a system refined to minimize trace exposure and consequence. The result is a hunt that leaves no recognizable scene. There is no aftermath to analyze, no clear beginning or end. The land momentarily involved returns almost immediately to equilibrium. Grass rises back into place, soil settles, shadows move on. From a distance, nothing appears to have changed. Something has been removed, but the environment holds no record of how. In ecosystems shaped by constant observation and pressure, this is a rare achievement. Not dominance through force, but dominance through erasure. A predator that does not just succeed, but succeeds quietly, without obligating the land to remember. For leopards, the hunt does not end where the ground ends. What follows is a transition into a different dimension of the ecosystem. One that exists above the surface, beyond the reach of most competitors, and largely outside human perception. This vertical space is not incidental. It is central to how the species survives without leaving evidence behind. In many habitats where leopards live, trees are not simply shelter. They are extensions of territory. Branches become pathways. Trunks function as barriers and vantage points. Height offers safety in environments crowded with rivals and scavengers. For leopards, the ability to move confidently upward reshapes how the entire hunting sequence is resolved. After a kill, remaining on the ground is a vulnerability. The scent of blood travels, sounds carry. Other predators patrol constantly, drawn to opportunity. Rather than defending a kill through confrontation, leopards reduce risk by removing it from the shared plane altogether. This behavior is not about dominance, it is about avoidance. Using powerful forelimbs and a flexible spine, leopards lift prey that can equal or exceed their own body weight. The act is deliberate and controlled. There is no dragging across open terrain, no prolonged contact with the ground. Instead, the carcass is raised and carried toward a tree chosen in advance. Selection matters. The tree must offer height, branch strength, and concealment. Once elevated, the prey is effectively removed from the ecosystem most animals occupy. This vertical relocation accomplishes several objectives at once. It prevents scavengers from accessing the kill. It limits the spread of scent at ground level. It eliminates the most obvious piece of evidence that something has occurred. Without remains on the surface, the event becomes invisible to those who arrive later. From below, the landscape appears unchanged. Grass remains upright. Soil shows no disturbance beyond what could be attributed to ordinary movement. Even trained observers scanning the ground may find nothing conclusive. The defining element, the prey itself, exists outside their frame of reference. This reliance on height also influences where leopards choose to operate. Territories rich in climbable structures. Trees, rocky ledges, steep embankments offer strategic advantage. In such environments, the leopard's presence is buffered by elevation. The ground becomes a temporary workspace rather than a final destination. Interaction with it is brief and limited. Importantly, this behavior does not revolve around a single animal's preference. It is consistent across populations. From African savannas to Asian forests, leopards repeatedly demonstrate the same pattern: hunt low, conclude high. This consistency indicates an evolutionary solution rather than an individual adaptation. Over time, leopards that failed to secure their kills vertically faced higher rates of loss and conflict. Those that did succeeded more often and passed the behavior on. The effect on human perception is profound. When livestock disappears near forest edges, investigations typically focus on the ground. Searchers look for drag marks, blood trails, or disturbed vegetation. When none are found, uncertainty grows. Without remains, explanations become speculative. The idea of a predator acting unseen feels implausible even when it is accurate. In reality, the evidence has simply been displaced. It exists in a space rarely examined, above eye level, concealed by foliage beyond routine inspection. The land itself does not hide the truth. It never held it. This vertical strategy also reduces the duration of exposure. Leopards feed intermittently, returning to elevated kills over time, rather than consuming everything at once. This behavior spreads activity across hours or days, without concentrating disturbance in a single location. The environment absorbs each visit as a minor event indistinguishable from normal wildlife movement. As a result, the aftermath of predation becomes fragmented. There is no clear timeline, no singular moment that can be reconstructed. What remains is absence without context, a missing animal, an intact landscape, a quiet space where something once existed. In ecological terms, this is efficiency taken to an extreme. Energy is conserved, risk is minimized, competition is avoided. But just as importantly, information is contained. The leopard does not advertise its success. It does not leave signals for others to interpret. The act of survival is completed without announcement. Over generations, this approach has shaped the leopard's role within its ecosystem. It functions as a regulator that rarely reveals itself. Prey populations adjust without dramatic displays of predation. Competitors encounter fewer opportunities for theft. Humans experience loss without clarity. The predator's influence remains real, but its footprint stays light. In this layered environment, the ground tells only part of the story. The rest unfolds above in silence, where branches carry weight and evidence no longer belongs to the land below. What disappears is not just prey, but the possibility of understanding exactly how it vanished. By the time the ecosystem settles, nothing points upward, and nothing on the surface explains what is gone. Discovery always comes late. In interactions between humans and leopards, the defining feature is not confrontation, but delay. By the time a loss is noticed, the event itself has already passed beyond reach. Hours separate cause from awareness, and in that gap, the environment resumes its ordinary functions. What remains is not a crime scene, but a settled landscape that resists interpretation. Time is the first agent of erasure. In warm climates, scent disperses quickly. Air currents break it apart, lifting particles away from the ground and diluting them into the broader atmosphere. Tracks that might have been visible immediately after an animal's passage soften as soil relaxes and moisture equalizes. Insects return to routine activity. Small scavengers move through the area, leaving their own signs that blur whatever limited evidence once existed. The longer the delay, the less distinct any trace becomes. Human investigation relies heavily on surface logic. Search patterns assume that evidence spreads outward along the ground. People look for drag marks, blood stains, broken vegetation, or linear trails leading away from the point of disappearance. These methods are effective when predators interact violently and openly with the terrain. They fail when the interaction was minimal to begin with. Leopard predation disrupts these assumptions. The ground-level phase is brief, controlled, and often concealed within natural cover. There is no prolonged pursuit to carve a visible path. There is no extended struggle to scatter clues. When the prey is removed vertically, the most important element of the event leaves the surface entirely. Investigators are left searching for something that was never meant to be found where they are looking. This mismatch creates uncertainty. Without clear signs, explanations multiply. Some attribute the loss to theft, others to disease or escape. In areas where leopards are known but rarely seen, the absence of evidence fuels speculation. Stories circulate of animals that vanish without explanation, reinforcing the idea that the predator operates beyond normal rules. In reality, the rules are consistent. They simply function outside common frames of reference. The environment itself accelerates this confusion. Natural systems are resilient. Grass straightens after being pressed. Soil compacts and stabilizes. Fallen leaves shift with the slightest wind. Within a short period, minor disturbances become indistinguishable from background variation. What little impact occurred during the hunt is absorbed and redistributed. The land does not preserve detail unless disruption is extensive. In regions shared with other large predators, the effect is amplified. Hyenas, jackals, and vultures routinely move through the same spaces, overlaying their own tracks and signs. Each passage adds noise to the record, making it increasingly difficult to isolate a single event. By the time humans arrive, the area reflects the cumulative activity of many species, not the specific actions of one. This pattern has consequences beyond individual losses. Repeated incidents without clear explanation alter how communities perceive risk. Fear grows not from visible threat, but from unpredictability. When danger cannot be mapped or anticipated, it feels omnipresent. Leopards, rarely seen and seldom caught in the act, acquire a reputation shaped more by absence than by observation. From an ecological perspective, this invisibility serves the predator well. Reduced detection lowers the likelihood of retaliation. Conflict often escalates when evidence is clear and attribution is immediate. When certainty is delayed or absent, responses become less direct. The leopard's behavior does not eliminate conflict, but it disperses it, preventing it from concentrating around specific moments or locations. Scientific monitoring faces similar challenges. Camera traps, track surveys, and kill site analyses depend on timely data. When predation leaves little trace, documentation becomes difficult. Many leopard kills go unrecorded, not because they do not occur, but because the conditions required to observe them are rarely met. This contributes to underestimation of the species' activity and influence within certain ecosystems. The delay between event and awareness also alters causality. By the time a missing animal is noticed, attention shifts from the act itself to its consequences. Questions focus on loss rather than process. How it happened becomes secondary to what is gone. In this way, the leopard's strategy reframes the interaction. The narrative begins at the end. Importantly, this is not a conscious deception. Leopards do not intend to confuse or mislead. Their behavior is the outcome of evolutionary pressures that favored efficiency, discretion, and risk avoidance. Over time, individuals that hunted quickly, removed prey from shared spaces, and minimized disturbance survived at higher rates. Those patterns accumulated, shaping a species whose success depends on leaving little behind. In landscapes increasingly shaped by human presence, this strategy becomes even more significant. Visibility carries cost. Predators that advertise their actions face heightened danger. Those that remain unseen persist longer. Leopards, adaptable and restrained, occupy this narrow margin. They coexist not by confronting human systems, but by slipping between them. As a result, many encounters end without resolution. A loss is registered, an area is searched, nothing conclusive is found. Life continues. The ecosystem absorbs the disturbance without pause. What might have been a moment of chaos resolves into stillness before it is even recognized as such. This temporal gap between action and discovery defines the leopard's advantage. It allows the predator to complete its role without interruption, while observers arrive only after the land has already returned to equilibrium. The environment does not testify. It offers no timeline, no sequence, no clear indication of responsibility. What remains is absence framed by normality. A missing animal, an intact landscape, and a silence that arrived long before anyone noticed. By the following day, the land appears unchanged. Light moves across the same ground. Wind bends the same grass. The forest resumes its rhythm without hesitation. Nothing marks the location as significant. Nothing indicates that a life was taken there. In ecological terms, the system has already completed its correction. This quiet resolution is central to how leopards persist. Their survival does not depend on overwhelming force or constant presence, but on precision that leaves no residue. Each successful hunt ends not with display, but with disappearance. The predator withdraws. The environment seals itself. What remains is balance restored without spectacle. Across their range, this pattern repeats. Leopards remove prey without altering the visible structure of the habitat. They do not reshape landscapes through repeated disturbance, nor do they announce dominance through repeated confrontation. Instead, they exert influence subtly. Populations adjust. Movement patterns shift. Yet the surface of the ecosystem remains largely intact. This strategy carries evolutionary significance. Predators that leave clear evidence invite competition, retaliation, and escalation. Those that minimize trace reduce exposure to all three. Over generations, this restraint becomes encoded behavior. The leopard's success lies not in how often it is seen, but in how rarely it is detected, even when active. From the perspective of the environment, this approach is efficient. Energy is transferred, order is maintained. No single event disrupts the larger system. The land does not need to recover because it was never visibly damaged. What was removed is integrated elsewhere out of sight without triggering instability. For humans, this absence challenges perception. Without signs, the instinct is to doubt. Yet the ecosystem operates independently of observation. It does not require recognition to function. Predation occurs whether or not it is witnessed, and balance is maintained, regardless of whether evidence is found. In this way, the leopard embodies a different form of power. Not the power to dominate openly, but the power to act without consequence. Not invisibility in the literal sense, but integration so complete that presence dissolves into background. The animal passes through the system without leaving a narrative behind. As night returns, the cycle continues. Movement resumes where cover is thickest. The ground remains unmarked. Trees stand ready to receive what the surface will not hold. By morning, the ecosystem will appear whole again, as if nothing has been taken. This is not chance. It is design shaped by survival. In the wild, not all predators leave stories behind. Some remove themselves from memory entirely. And in landscapes shared with many eyes, that restraint becomes the most enduring strategy of all. The land remembers nothing because it was never asked to.